The March 26th agreement was premised on the mutual belief, that we were going to be in a position where we would be playing baseball games in full stadiums. And I think that we find ourselves in a situation where we're going to be playing largely without fans, if not exclusively without fans. And that altered the economic landscape and really required another negotiation.
That was Rob Manfred the other night. He said the March 26 agreement was made with the premise that both sides, there was a mutual belief that they were going to be in a position where there will be no fans. So how does that change things, if at all? If Kevin Cooney, longtime baseball writer, Forbes, PhillyVoice, were the commissioner, what would he do now? Let's try to get some order here. Kevin Cooney's with us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. So you just heard the commissioner there, Kev. He said both sides, March 26, were under the premise that they were going to have fans in the stands, and that's how they negotiated. So now the players don't want to budge because they said they already negotiated a deal. Now Manfred's saying they negotiated a deal under the pretense that fans would be in the stands, and here we are now, no fans. So does that change our viewpoints at all?
First of all, Rob Manfred is a barrel of energy, isn't he? I mean, just a dynamic speaker. No, look, all of us who were figuring things out back in March, and I think you and I talked about this, Mike, we knew that there was a strong possibility at that point that there was going to be no fans in any stands. You know, you only had to see the way this pandemic was growing at that point. You know, we're talking 2-3 weeks removed from the stoppages of games and what happened with Rudy Gobert and spring training being suspended and the NHL suspending, to know that this was that we were all in pretty bad shape, and getting anything done this year was going to probably be done in isolation. So either they didn't see this, either they weren't paying attention to what was going on, or they are trying to use a pandemic to get something, set up for the collective bargaining agreement at the end of the 2021 season. And I think it's a little bit of both. And so at this point, try to cut the best deal you can. I'm not saying that the players have to get 100%, but some of the numbers they were throwing around were downright insulting, and it was never a good negotiating start point. And if that's the case, we're getting near the point where they're going to impose this 48-game schedule. I saw what they proposed today. It's a little closer, but it's still probably not going to be enough. And it's going to be tied into whether the playoffs are completed in their entirety, and basically that some of the money is going to have to go into a pool to make sure the season is completed fully. I don't see where any of these ideas are going to work.
Yeah, Kevin, by the way, John Heyman reported today the league expected to propose a 72-game season with more than 80% of prorated pay for the players if there's a postseason. Of course, the players want 100. They said they've already negotiated this. They don't want to budge. So at this point, if the commissioner steps in, is that the angle you think this will end up having to go down? Is that Rob Manfred is going to have to just say, all right, I'm stepping in, we're playing 48 games, or is there a number and a spot they can get to based off of the proposals that have gone back and forth?
Look, it seems to me 80 games at maybe 90 to 92% of revenue would be the most likely scenario, or middle ground. Both sides have to give a little. I think that the owners have to realize that tying everything to the amount of postseason revenue the way they have, like the proposal earlier in the week was you would get 75% of the pay, your prorated pay. But that was only if you completed the entire postseason and the expanded postseason, without a pandemic thing going on either, which doesn't do anything. Otherwise, it was going to be 50% of prorated pay. You can't throw little clauses in there that make it very, like a punishment to the players that a pandemic happened. So to me, 90% of it of prorated, just flat out number. That's the way it's going to have to get done. 80 games. If not, we're going to end up with a 48 game season at that point, or a 50 game season. And to be honest, Mike, that does nobody any good. It makes a mockery of the season. It will also lead to the players, if it's imposed upon them, refusing to do any of the things the sport's going to need to do to stay in an active marketplace. Remember, you're going to have the NHL and the NBA going at it, and the start of the NFL most likely at this point. And you have players who will not be motivated to do one step more than the minimum to help the game. That would be a disaster for the sport. They would almost be better off canceling the sport at that point.
Gil and I started the show all week long with baseball, just screaming about baseball and not getting the job done. Is it possible that the MLB is going with the all publicity is good publicity motto, or is this just too ugly at this point?
This is too ugly at this point. This is because even if they get things settled right now, I think what has happened is the die has been cast for this CBA talk next year. You look very insensitive in doing this, given the fact that there's 40 million unemployment claims and over 105,000 people dead and all that. I mean, you hate bringing the real world into it, but this is a fan base. This was a sport that was declining in popularity already, and I love the sport, and I take no pleasure in saying that, but it's also just reality that it was losing its grip on the American consciousness anyway because of the way it's marketed itself and all the things and the slow pace and all that. And now you're going to make it look like you're a bunch of stuck-up jerks too? None of it is good publicity.
Well, and Kevin, even if, okay, let's say you just totally didn't know what was going on, you've been so removed, and it's like, hey, baseball's back. And the two sides have been going back and forth. The problem that they have is even if you said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, you're going back to a game that most people weren't all that excited about to begin with, and you're adding in no fans, which I'm imagining is going to, I don't want to say tarnish the product a little bit, but it's going to make it much more difficult for you to enjoy an already unenjoyable product to many.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to end up expanding rosters, which may mean more pitching changes, which may mean more, basically like playing September baseball every day with the 40-man expanded rosters in the year when the 40-man expanded roster was supposed to go away, pretty much. And think of this, Mike. If the season, we're assuming the season is going to go on, okay? But even going back to 94, there was a minor league still. There were little leagues. There were American Legion ball. Go down the line. High school ball, college ball. To fill the rest of to fill summer, okay? To fill the bulk of the summer and to go into the next year, you have none of that for this sport right now. This sport is shut down to its completion, okay? And you could have, in theory, 75 baseball games for the remainder of 2020, okay? And that, except for the beginning of the spring training calendar, that's it, okay? It's not good for the sport in any circumstance. I find, when some of us sit back and go, maybe you're better off just taking the whole year off. The danger is that you become removed from the consciousness of the American public.
Well, and Kevin, the daunting possibility of basketball changing its calendar on you when baseball had a month or two to itself, they wouldn't even potentially have that moving forward.
No, because you're going to think that the NBA is looking at this as an invitation to go at least another month, to go into July. Now, next year, 2021, it may not happen that way because of the Olympics and commitments they may have with the Olympics. But sure, I mean, this is something now that baseball will have no exclusive time to the calendar pretty much, because by the time the NBA is done, assuming it's mid to late July, you're going to go right into NFL training camps. Even the NHL doesn't seem like they're all that afraid of Major League Baseball at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if if the NHL moves their schedule back to compete more into late June, early July after what we're seeing this year.
Even if they came back early, just say 1 month before all the other sports, once everything returned, can't we argue that they would be screwed then too? It just seems like baseball is in a lose-lose situation no matter what they did.
Well, think about it. Okay, you could have had the entire month of July, pretty much, if you had buttoned this up and everything, and if guys were going to report to spring training either at their home sites or in Florida, they would have had a whole month, 3 weeks to get ready. They would have had pretty much the way the calendar is broke the whole month of July. Okay, because the NBA starts on July 30th, the NHL will start like around July 31st or August 1st. Okay, now at best, even if this was settled tomorrow, you're talking maybe 10 days to get guys together. You're talking 3 to 4 more weeks of maybe an abbreviated spring training. Maybe you start July 20th, so 10 days. It's not going to be a hell of a long exclusive period. And as Mike said, the idea that you're not going to have anybody in the stands, you're not even going to have like broadcasters traveling with them, that it's going to be home team broadcasters at one park and maybe visiting team broadcasters from studios back at home. Boy, the sport's going to be awful challenged to get any attention at this point.
All right. So, Kevin Cooney, you tweeted this out, a couple days ago regarding the plan, and it looks like, sources saying that they're going to try to get up between 70 and 75 games. That was the latest today, which is right around. Now, Manfred said the other day that the next proposal would be in favor of the players, which, I guess this 85% is going a little bit more towards that way. But as you said, 92%, somewhere in there, to get it up to about 80 games. Overall, do we have the agreement? Do we have an agreement, or does the commissioner step in first? Let's go to that.
I think they're getting close enough to think there'll be an agreement, only because the optics of a mandated are so dire. I think I think both sides understand that would be awful for the product. So I think there'll be some.
How haven't they seen that up to this point?
Because everybody is, Mike, everybody's posturing for next year. Everybody's posturing.
And I'm glad you brought me to that, Kevin. So let me get your opinion on this, because I can't figure it out. Why, if you came to an agreement this year under the circumstances that are completely unique, the people that keep saying, well, if you agree to this now, you're going to look weak next year. Why would one negotiation and showing some sort of weakness, if you perceive it to be, have anything to do with the next one? Well, you gave in last time. Why don't you give in this time? Because last time there was a pandemic. That's why. That's why I gave in. This time I'm not going to negotiate. I don't understand that premise that you will look weak if you agree under these circumstances.
You're using logic, and that is not used in Major League Baseball all that often, Mike. But let's be honest, okay? In the next negotiations, if you're Tony Clark, you've got to at least hold the line. You cannot lose any more ground like you did the last time 5 years ago. Okay, there's a lot of pressure for him to get this right. And if you're Rob Manfred and you've had an awful stretch as a commissioner between the Houston situation, the falling numbers, the idea is some people think that you don't even like the game that you're the commissioner of. Okay, and there's people in the sport and people outside the sport who have said that. Okay, if you're Rob Manfred and you, as a chief negotiator for all those years, look weak against the union this time around, that's where you end up having real problems. One of those guys will emerge from that next labor negotiations losing their job at this point.
Kevin Cooney, at Kevin Cooney on Twitter. Check out his podcast, Working the Beat, with Mike Kern. They had a podcast the other day with Bob Nightingale talking a lot about this stuff, so I encourage you to go check that out. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Kevin, have a great weekend, pal. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. See you guys soon.
All right. And, he said it. I use logic, which a lot of people, I guess, in baseball don't. But how did they not get to this point and say, man, we look terrible? I think this is where, again, the commissioner should have set a date of, if you guys can't get together by this date, we need to be on the field by July 4th. So this is the date that you need to come together on an agreement.